Okay, this video about that is going to be how can I play my loud tube amp quietly? You know, the wife's home, neighbors, things like that. Is it possible to do that? Yeah, but there's a lot of ways to skin that cat. So I'm going to try in this video to make it as quick as I can and just kind of go through some of them. First off, you can use one of these little boxes. This is made by GHS. It's called a little black amp box, and what this does is it gets plugged into your effects loop. So you go like plug a cable in here, send. For some reason this box, unless it says it on there somewhere, it doesn't really have an in out. That's why I got tape. I put tape on there and put out on it. So I plug this into the input, send into the input. Output part here will go into the effects return. What that does is it gives you a master volume. So if you have an amp, say like one of those plexi head that doesn't have a master volume, or even like this CS20H, this Studio Classic, it does have a master volume, but it goes from nothing to super loud real quick. So you can use this in your effects loop. Make sure you turn your effects loop button on, by the way, and you can turn that down, acting like a master volume. That works, but the only thing that is bad about that is it's lowering the volume. It's hitting your power tubes, so it's not going to sound the same as if you had this amp cranking good. So a lot of guys will say, yeah, it's not a good thing to do, you know, because you're going to lose the tone of the amp, and that is correct, you know, but some guys like that tone, so they don't want to hit their power amps as hard. So this would probably be a really good cheap way of doing that. Like a plexi head, that's pretty much, you know, that's a good part of that tone is hitting them power tubes real hard. So this option, I don't know if that would be my first choice. Some guys don't like the power tube distortion, so if that's you fit in that category, then this is a good route then. Okay, so what's the other option? Quiet. I could go out this, plug in my amp. I have to have a speaker cab plugged in on a tube amp at all times, so we have to always worry about that, right? So I could go DI out, you know, and that's going to capture the sound of the preamp and power amp, but not the speaker cab. So I could run an IR after that if I'm like recording, or I have one of those little boxes that what is it? I think there's one called Mower or something like that. They make one little impulse response player. It's like a little pedal or something. You can have one of those out of this, DI out, and then you can, I think some of those might have headphone jacks on them, or you can just plug it into an interface or something like that, or mixing board with headphones or something like that. But we still have the problem with the speaker being loud in the room. So there's one way we can skin that cat. Take your little patch cable and plug it into the return. And effectively what that does is turn the power amp section off. There's actually a switch inside these jacks, or switching jacks, as they make connections or disconnect something inside there. So that'll do that. Most amps will do that, and the easiest way to find out if yours does that is get your little short cable like this, or you can just use a jack or a plug or something that's 1/4 inch and just plug it in, then turn your amp on. If you don't want to hear anything, well then there you go. Sometimes this don't work real good, depends on the amp. Having the cables out like this sometimes can kind of act like an antenna, so that's not exactly my first choice, but some of them will work real well doing that. And then you can do run out of your DI out, or you can even run out of your send then too, and then into an impulse response. You can use a DI box like this one. Not all amps have those DI outputs. Like, let's see, that DSL up there doesn't. So if it don't, you can buy a box like this. This is a kind of an expensive one, but It allows you to go your speaker. You can go from your speaker out right here, plug it into the end of this, use another speaker cable from the through into your cab, because now it has a load. Your amp needs a load, so that's going through, so it's still putting a load on that, so that works right. This has a switch here between instrument and speaker. On the back side of it has an output. This is actually a microphone output. It requires phantom power on this one, and then you can run that, get that into a mixing board or an interface, and then control your volume that way. Still gonna, you don't have the speaker sound, so you're still going to need an impulse response after that one. Here's basically this is a DI2. It's also a load box, attenuator, and speaker sim. So on this one, on the back side of it, you come out of your amp, speaker out. This one's rated at certain ohms and wattage too, by the way. They come in 16, 8, and 4. I actually have the 16 too. I recommend if you're going to buy one, buy the 8 ohm, because it'll pretty much probably work with just about anything. I think I originally bought the 16 ohm, and then then I found out I was using some of these smaller amps with 8 ohm cabs, so it's like, oh, that didn't work, so I had to buy this one. So anyhow, if you're going to buy one, I would recommend the 8 ohm first, unless all you have is an amp with a 16 ohm cab, then you will go with 16 ohm, depending on, again, what you're using it for. Because you could use this in different ways. So because if you're using it as a low box only, then it doesn't matter which one you have. But if you're going to run your cab, I'm going to go through. So this has the input from the speaker out into the input of here, and this has a through just like the Nave does. In that case, this has to match the ohms of your cab and your amp all have to be the same. As a low box, it doesn't matter. How this works as a low box, you just come out. I mean, I guess it does matter, but it's still got to be, if it says 8 ohms, you got to plug in your 8 ohm over here. Okay, so if I'm going to use that one on this amp here, I'd plug in right here, speaker out, just into there, and that's all you do. Then this is just a load box. Turn it around here. This might be a little confusing here on the front side. So if I'm using it as just a load box, I have a line out right here with an output level, which is nice. I also have a XLR out here, and this part here contains the speaker sim, so if you want to use a speaker sim on this, I don't really recommend it. It's not very good sounding, but it's there if you need it. It has a guitar speaker on it, an off position, and a bass. So I don't ever use that part of it. It's kind of useless, I think, but anyhow, I guess if you don't have any impulse responses, I mean, you can get free ones online, so if you're running like into a DAW or something like that, I wouldn't, free impulses would sound way better than what this does. So I always use this one just as the line out, the dry out, and it's not affected. So anyhow, so this one can be, like I said, used as a DI, okay, and send it, or not plugging your cab in at all. And this is the best thing if you want total silence in the room. Because when you come out of your amp into this, now there's backside there, that red there, that only, and stop right there, then now you're using this as a load box. You don't have to plug your speaker cab in then. Totally silent in the room. Come out of this 1/4 inch TRS jack into your mixing board or interface or whatever, and that's about as quiet as you're going to get. So that's one of the better ways, but still you're using the having to use impulse responses, but you are capturing the sound of your preamp and your power amp section too. So now we'll move along. Next thing is an attenuator. I got one of these, a little Weber mini mass. Also have another one down there, a little bit bigger one. The reason I have two, because the little mini mass here is rated at, let's see here, I remember, I think it's like 30 watts or something. I'm pretty sure it's 30 watts. So it won't handle the big amps, so I had to get one that will. This one here is rated at 200 watts. So you always want, if you get an attenuator, you always want it the watt rating to be more than what your amp is you're using. So if it's right at it, you could risk actually blowing the attenuator and then blowing your amp up, so you don't want to go that route. So how the attenuator works, the back side of this one will come out of the speaker out, and on this one it says from input from amp, so that's where I plug that speaker cable. I normally have the speaker cable coming out of here. I'll go into here, and this is not a load box, so I have to go output to speaker. So you can think of it as like these here, said in and through, in, so in and then through. Okay, so now I'm going to hear the speaker in the room, right? This also has a line out, which is like a DI, and I'll be honest, both these Webers they use as a DI suck. Really noisy. They work great as attenuators, but as a DI, nope. Definitely wouldn't choose them. I would choose either one of these two any day of the week over those. So now this one here gives you a option to switch what the ohms input is. You're coming from your amp, so if you got 16 ohms, stick it in the middle, 4 go down, 8 whatever. Actually has a switch on it. You can switch it on and off. So if you want it attenuated, this is how you attenuate it. This is the volume knob now for your speaker. Think of that, it's the speaker. And yes, their knobs are really grindy sounding. That's the way they work. Okay, and this also has a treble boost. And the reason for that, usually most attenuators will lose a little bit of high end, so it allows you to boost it up. You can have a choice of not none at all, 0 dB, or a little bit, 3 dB, or 6 dB. And this is how you can turn it up. So you want to play real quiet, turn it down. But the thing with this, that's great. It's like giving you a volume knob on your speaker, but is it going to sound good? Not as good as the real thing, but it might keep you from getting killed by your wife or neighbors or the cops called. So that does work. It's definitely a viable thing to use. I think it works better than the little JHS, so you're actually capturing the sound of your power amp tubes too. You're hitting them like you want to, and you can turn it down. But it does have that little slight thing with the treble boost, and it's going to sound a little different. And then when your speakers are just quieter at a lower volume, they're going to sound different. Now on this one, I'll show you this one real quick. It's basically the same thing, except see, this one allows you to, instead of a switch on the treble, boosting the treble, it gives you a knob. So this one actually, technically, it sounds better than the mini mass because you can adjust that a little bit better. And it also has that line level adjustment for the line out if you're using it kind of like a DI. But again, these things, the DI parts of them, sorry, they suck. So, but if you're using it as an attenuator, you're probably not going to use the DI and an attenuator at the same time, generally speaking, anyhow, I guess. But I guess you might want to. So anyhow, so I think that is it and covers it all. Hopefully you understand now a little bit better. Oh, forgot to mention, I was talking about using the send, and I was mentioning you can plug in a cable here or whatever that bypass your power amp section. A lot of amps you can just, when you power it up, put the power on and you just leave it on standby, the preamp will still work. So in that case, this is like probably the cheapest route you could go to quiet down your amp. You got the speaker cab plugged in, leave it on, just turn the power on, leave it on standby. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not 100% sure all amps do this. I know some do this. You just have to try it. It's not going to hurt your amp or anything, but just go out of this send and then see it, plug it into something, see if you're getting a signal. But if you run it that way, and that is absolutely the cheapest route you can go, all you need to quiet it down then is a cable out of here. Then you need to go into like some kind of a interface or something like that. So you're going into an interface, then load up an IR. And I highly recommend, if you're doing it that way, to go visit zombiecabs.com, because they make impulse responses that were made with tube amps. So there's a good chance you can find one of the amps they use that are similar to one that you have, and or you can even try other ones out too. It'll give you a different flavor. And it's not going to be 100% accurate, not using the real deal, but it's going to be a lot closer. So that's the easiest and cheapest route you could possibly go to try to record quietly, or even listen to your amp. So the other thing is when there's different ways when you are coming out of the send, like I mentioned before, that little Moore box. And there might be some other companies that make that accepts a line level in from, say, your DI out or whatever, or a send like that, and then you can load up impulse responses on one of them boxes as well, I guess. And depending, if you got the DI out, you wouldn't need any impulse responses that were made with tubes. But if you're going this route, you definitely want to check that out. Like I said, the zombie cabs, because that's definitely going to put you closer to the real deal. Alright, back to the video. Oh, and another thing, if you buy the zombie cabs impulse responses that are made with tubes, they also come with solid state. So if you go this route and then later down the road you want to choose one of the other things to do, you can still use those IRs, which is cool.